if he did not know the emptiness and the betrayal, how could he be the one that we run to when we experience all of these eventualities of life? And we've all experienced some of them. So when we see Jesus asleep in the back of that boat, we are reminded of his humanity, that he is one that understands our weakness and that he is no stranger to pain and suffering and to the predicaments that we find in our lives. Have you come here this morning feeling alone and neglected? Jesus knows how you feel. He came to his own, and his own rejected him. And even his disciples, at the end of the day, what happened? They all abandoned him. They all scattered. There is no experience of neglect or desertion that we might ever know that has not already rung in the heart of Christ. Are you here this morning maybe feeling a little misunderstood, slandered, misrepresented? Again, Jesus knows exactly how you feel. For he was abused and despised. He was called a glutton, a drunkard, a friend of publicans and sinners. Well, you know what? That wasn't even a lie. But clearly, he was misrepresented. The beauty and the wonder of his character was consistently slandered by others. Are you here this morning aware of the trials and the troubles that come into your life as a result of the attacks of the evil one? Heinous thoughts from your past? The devil throwing this stuff back on you, telling you how terrible you are? Remember that Jesus wrestled for 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, and then he met the evil one. Have you come here this morning with your mind in agony and turmoil? Let me ask you, could that agony, could that turmoil be anything close to what Jesus suffered on the cross when he finally cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It is a simple truth. But there is no one that is better suited to deal with the predicaments than we face than the master that was sleeping on the cushion in the back of the boat. And it was because of his humanity that he needed to sleep, and it was because of his deity that he could sleep. Third point. The disciples were really afraid. The boat was nearly swamped, the master was sound asleep, and the disciples were really afraid. Look at them. Can't you imagine them scurrying all around, scared, wanting to wake him up, but being so afraid to wake him up, but more afraid not to? So they wake him up and they ask, look at the end of verse 38, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Lesson 3 is then, true followers of Jesus Christ still ask dumb questions. Don't you care if we drown? Now this should come as an encouragement to those of us that for the better part of a week continue to ask dumb questions, right? Because we've chided ourselves that, man, I'm just not much of a Christian, because if I was, I wouldn't be asking these stupid questions. I wouldn't be going through this stuff time and time again. I would have gotten it. But we still go through it. If I had a true understanding of the Bible and what God expects of me, then, well, all that stuff I wouldn't be asking. Well, look what's illustrated for us right here. Men who got to eat with Jesus, got to watch him as he performed miracles, lived in an intimate setting with the Savior of the world. And what are they doing? They're all running around in panic mode. They're guilty of unbelief, saying that we're going to drown. They're guilty of distrust. Don't you care if we drown? They're guilty of impatience, because they could have just waited until he woke up. I mean, the boat's tossing around. He's probably going to wake up pretty quick anyway. But their fear started, and their impatience took over. How true is that with us? Our fear kicks in, and then our impatience takes over. God, fix it now. Help me with this now. I don't think I can take another moment of this. How so like us is this? As long as there's smooth sailing, all is well. As long as the flaps on the plane come up the way they're supposed to when you're looking out the window, when you're getting ready to land, or when you're up there in the air, everything's fine. But you hit a pocket of turbulence, or the winds start blowing, and the waves start coming up, the wheels come off. Our faith evaporates. What strikes me here is that these were seasoned men, many of whom were already fishermen. They knew the waves, they knew the wind, and yet they were afraid. And the thing that really strikes me is that they knew Jesus, but they were not so religious that they were immune from fear, free from lack of faith. And as long as you and I live in this body, as long as we're on this side of heaven, we are going to be confronted by our own frailty. We only need to read the history of God's people to see that that is true throughout history. Look at Abraham, for example. God comes to him, of course he was called Abram at that time, and says, "Go to a land that I will show you. Go to a land that I will show you." What's he do? He picks up his stuff and he goes. He's got great faith. Well, what happened when the famine came and he was supposed to go, he had to go down to Egypt? Where is this great bastion of faith at that point? He turns to his wife Sarai and says, "Hey, sweetie, you're going to need to pretend to be my sister, because otherwise they're going to kill you. They're going to kill me and take you." This man that was on the path of faith did not have enough faith to believe that God would take care of he and his wife. And it didn't happen just once. Remember it? It happened again. Same thing, same story. The great hero of faith, his faith evaporates. And to be honest, we probably wouldn't have been any different from the boys in the boat now, would we? We'd probably handle it about the same way. And since we recognize that this is true in ourselves, there's a subpoint to this. If I recognize in myself that I have this frailty, this fear, this faltering, and if I want God to tolerate it in me, then what right do I have not to tolerate it in you? And as you think through this, recognize that there are flaws in all diamonds. Every one of them's got a flaw. Does that mean that because they've got flaws, we throw them out with the trash? No, they're still very, very valuable. And those that seek to follow Jesus, and those that are our brothers and sisters that are earnestly trying to grow in their faith and their walk with Christ, well, they're flawed, just as you and I are flawed. But we want God to tolerate our flaws, and He wants us to tolerate those flaws in others. Point 4. The storm was completely stilled. Verse 39, "And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm."